Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. You are now listening to season 7 of the show. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Alma-Constance Denis-Smith and Lucinda Acland. Alma and Lucinda are the co-hosts of Kids Law, a podcast aimed at children and their families. Alma and Lucinda talk to experts in the legal field on a range of topics, including the law's impact on children's lives, keeping safe, and making good decisions. In 2018, Alma led a charity appeal for Spark 21 at the British Legal Awards in support of the first 100 years. Alma's appeal raised £12,000 and funds were used for the first 100 years of Women in Law publication. Lucinda is an experienced podcast host, having presented the first 100 years podcast, and is the co-author of the first 100 years of Women in Law. A qualified solicitor, Lucinda is passionate about volunteering her time to legal aid and law centre work on the front line of the access to justice debate. Together, Alma and Lucinda make a powerful team, tackling subjects that teach young people more about complex legal concepts. So, a very big warm welcome, Alma and Lucinda.
Hello, Rob.
Hello, both. I'm super excited about today's discussion. And before we dive into all your amazing projects and experiences to date, we do have a customary opening question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it? Coming to you, Lucinda.
Well, I'm afraid I haven't seen it. I know that being in the US, it's going to be very different from firms in the UK, and I imagine it's all about personal relationships and the dramas, which is fun, but it's not realistic. So probably a 0, I'm afraid.
And do not be afraid. I think that's an absolute fair answer. And with that, we're going to move swiftly on to talking all about yourself and Alma. And Alma, I'd love to come to you first, because some of our regular listeners will know that we featured your mum on the show before as well. And I'm really curious to know a bit more about your career aspirations and your career journey and where you see that going. So feel free to tell us a little bit more about your future ahead.
I'm just going to answer this really simply. I have literally no idea what I'm going to become, because I love law and I love music. So I play piano, and everything is just mixed up. So I like everything basically at the moment. I don't have a clear sense yet. Maybe in
I think if someone was to ask me that question where you're at this stage, I would probably have the very same answer. So it's good for you to sort of absorb as much as you can and take what you like and go in that direction. So Lucinda, we'd love to come to you and maybe allow you to tell a bit about our listeners, your background and career journey.
Well, I think this is probably one of the reasons why Alma and I are such a great team. I'm at the other end of the spectrum because I've been working in the legal sector for over 30 years now in a variety of positions. I started as a civil litigator at what was Lovell White Durrant, now Hogan Lovells, and then I was looking for a more 9-to-5 role because I had a family and you couldn't work flexibly at all, certainly as a litigator in those days. So I worked as a professional support lawyer, and it was to bridge the what was a new area, use of IT in litigation. So a bridge between the IT department, the lawyers and the courts then. Then moved to the College of Law, and again, University of Law now, and created CPD training videos and then designed online courses, and got asked to join one of the new alternative business structures, Riverview Law, to use social media as a way of promoting their company, which was, you probably know, was a really new platform for lawyers in those days. And that was great because you could promote your visibility to an incredibly wide audience in real time. I then worked for Obelisk Support, joining Dana, which again, she was one of the early people to set up an organisation promoting flexible work for lawyers. And I matched lawyers into roles and trained and support them because many of them were returners. And it was a very different way of working from on-site full-time to part-time online and working remotely, flexibly. At the same time, I volunteered for Obelisk project that Dana had set up, a charity project, the first 100 years, and that helped promote that and created a podcast series which documented the centenary of women being able to practice law, and interviewed academics and practitioners. And then, I feel like, I'm sorry, it is then and then and then, such is my age. I worked for head of learning at Legal Aid Practitioners Group, and I'm now a trustee at the North Kensington Law Centre.
And what an amazing journey. And like you said at the outset of your response, it's great to bring two people together with, very different stages of careers and to put that all into a show. And that leads nicely on to, Alma, my next question, because along with Lucinda, you started Kids Law, I believe, in 2021. I believe you were only 10 years old at the time. For those people who may not be familiar, can you tell us what Kids Law is all about, please, Alma?
Well, Kids Law is really about teaching kids law. So that's why the name is Kids Law. Kind of makes sense. And it's really about how law affects children as we grow up. So it's about kind of educating those that might not have such a wide knowledge about law, and how it can change their lives basically in ways that they couldn't really imagine. So that's kind of to sum it up.
Yeah, and I think you summed it up beautifully. And Lucinda, I'd love to come to you with, you've done so many very different roles. What was your inspiration for wanting to start Kids Law, and how did it all come about?
Well, I had really enjoyed the medium of podcasts. It's something you can do not only practically, flexibly, but also it's such an accessible way. And I love the democratic element. You go onto podcasts now and everyone's talking about any old thing. But I thought it would be a good way to explain. I wanted to explain more to general people about laws, because people get quite frightened or they think it's very exclusive. But I thought nobody's going to be particularly interested in me droning on. And I was talking to Dana, and we came up with the idea, particularly with the hook of the age of criminal responsibility. And it is quite shocking, to be honest. So we thought we would set this podcast up, and I thought, do it in a short, accessible format, talking to the actual people who are doing it. So how laws are made, interpreted, and how they can be challenged, and they could explain themselves. And I think people quite like it, that it's aimed at young people, so you don't have to be incredibly formal or sort of aware of your status. You just say what you do and try and explain it. And in fact, Alma, we know lots of adults listen to it, don't we? That's a really nice thing. And I guess just coming back to the criminal responsibility point, it really highlights the responsibility that young children have, but we wanted to look at their rights. And, I guess the first time that often people come across law is when it's an emergency, something's gone very wrong. So we wanted to sort of shine a light to explain more of it.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a tremendous job of it. And, you covered so many points there. Alma, I'd just like to ask you, was there any particular inspiration for yourself in wanting to start the show from your side?
Well, for me, it was really turning 10. Obviously, 10 is double digit. Everybody was very excited. And then suddenly, the age of criminal responsibility. Isn't that exciting too, Alma? And then I told all my friends and my colleagues at school, and they had literally no idea, and their parents had no idea either. So I thought, and Lucinda also thought, nobody knows about, people in general don't know much about law, because as Lucinda said, it is frightening, it's a big thing, there are so many details in it, they don't really, they don't take the view that they're able to understand it. So it's really about, for me, it was really about telling my friends and kids about how law can affect them, and then it kind of evolved into for everyone to understand it in a simple way.
Yeah, I always say it's better to be clear than it is to be clever, and I think you do a tremendous job with your show. Are you a mid-sized law firm looking to thrive in 2024 and beyond? Look no further. 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬 has just released their highly anticipated 2024 Legal Trends Report for mid-sized law firms. This comprehensive report is packed with actionable insights that will empower your firm to stay competitive in the ever-changing legal landscape. Discover how to enhance your billing and collections, harness the power of AI tools, and leverage cloud-based technology for success. Download the 2024 Legal Trends Report for mid-sized law firms today. Visit 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐭.UK/resources to learn more. And Lucinda, I'd love to ask you the journey, because how has the podcast grown and developed 3 years on? Take us through the process and sort of where it is today.
Well, we are on series 4 now, and we have some sort of 45 episodes, which is brilliant. It's a pretty sort of organic development because we're dependent on the availability of our interviewees when they, generously give up their time to support the project. And it started really, I think, Alma, wasn't it, as a mix of people who had worked in organisations like judges in the courts, MPs who make the law, in the Lords, how they review the laws. We're sort of moving on to, hopefully some more practical situations. I have a network of contacts, as does Dana, and we approach people to invite them. I can think on more thematically things like what is justice? What is the rule of law? And then an event such as broadly topical, such as the coronation, that, does the king have to obey the law?
Yeah, and I think it's great, all the topics and what you cover. And sticking with you for a moment, Lucinda, would you mind talking us through the process of making these podcast episodes? How do you create? How do you collaborate? Like you mentioned, you've got a lot of contacts out there to put on this show and put on every episode that you do.
So for each series, Dana and I get together and discuss sort of broad themes or people to interview that we can think of, or topics that might be coming up or have done in the news. And then between us, we contact them and invite them to come in, sending them a link and saying, we'd really like to talk to you on this. Then there's a question of fitting the timetable. I then do some more detailed research and create a draft outline with questions. And I often put in a narrative thread because, people give up their time for free. And also it helps them keep a focus on the audience. And also we try and make it relatively under half an hour for people's attention span. So, I ask Alma if she's got any particular questions, and they may come in then, or during the interview, Alma might think of something. So I record and edit from my laptop. I'm a bit low tech, but it seems to work for us. And we use Buzzsprout. And then Dana typically organises one of her team, to publicise the episode online. And I think, Alma, you've created some of the Canva templates, haven't you?
Yeah, that's quite a fun way of kind of like enjoying the podcast part too in a different way, because you can kind of use your imagination on the different styles on Canva too. So,
and I think, I don't know if you want to add anything, Alma, but I think over the years we've got to be quite a good team. We're both on the same page as to what we're trying to achieve.
Well, I hope that was the way it was before too, but definitely, I feel like also we can work better together. I've learned how to use my Gmail, which I did not know how to use when I was 10, which definitely helps. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that part.
One question I'd love to ask you, Alma, is how challenging, what's the most challenging aspect of teaching kids about the law and how it affects them?
Well, I feel like the most challenging part is really explaining the law or the episode in a simple way, just because we do have quite a wide range of ages listening that can go up to 100, I think, and all the way down to 7 years old, I think, even less. So our main goal is for children to understand the law, so we have to make it quite easy to understand and make sure that it is easily explained on our part, but also on the guests' side too, just so that everything can be understood by the listeners.
Yeah, and again, really important. And I always say on the show as well, if you confuse people, you lose people. So trying to keep it as clear and as easy for people to digest and understand is super important. Lucinda, why do you believe it's important to educate the youth of today about their legal rights specifically? And what can young people be doing to spread awareness about the law affecting them?
I think because, as I've said, there is a general lack of understanding generally, and I think that goes down to sort of lack of time in schools to introduce concepts. I think people, if they could understand they have more power than they think, law is basically the underpinning skeleton of our society. And if they could understand that if they lobbied local authority, council members or MPs about the issues that meant something to them, they would feel more engaged. Because I think particularly with the news being so shocking, I think people are turned off by it, especially when people are having difficulties. So I think it's important as well to try and think of the different ages, because, children, like people, are not a homogenous group in terms of their education, abilities, family, economic situations. And, having Alma as my co-host, she can certainly ask things. She's got a really on the point perspective. And so if it passes the Alma test, I'm pretty happy. And in terms of getting young people to spread awareness, I think they could ask their schools to get people in, organise trips to find how law works. One of the great things is I've come to discover is how willing people are to explain it. They're really keen to give back. You can visit a court from 14 and they may want to learn about campaigns to change laws, and people are increasingly keen to have children's perspective, people participating with them.
Yeah, and again, you give some really good examples and things that people can be thinking about. Alma, I would love to come to you to ask you, and it's probably quite a tough question, what has been your favourite episode to date? Or has there been a particular topic of discussion that you've most enjoyed?
Well, I can't really answer the first part of the question because, every episode is just excellent. There's not one that I can just point out and say, that's the best one, because each one is about a different theme, a different subject, so it's really hard to choose. So I haven't. But for the favourite topic, I did really like talking about the inequality of law. So about how, you need to be in a financially good place to be able to afford a lawyer and to have access to the law. So I really enjoyed that theme, but also about the discrimination that children can face. So this is quite an old episode, but for example, with Kirsty Brimlow, we had a episode about witchcraft and how children can be discriminated against being kind of witches and wizards and being like the demon and possessed. So I feel like that was a really important theme because it affects us and it kind of shows the different aspects of law, even the ones that aren't really known.
Yeah, and that's the whole beauty, isn't it, of podcasts? You can kind of bring to light certain things that might not necessarily be readily in people's ears and eyes. And so I'd come to you, Lucinda. You may not want to be put on the spot as well in terms of favourite guest, but topic or anything you would say related to that.
Well, it's funny. I had thought of a similar one because although it sounds a really light sort of autumn topic, it turned into an incredibly serious thing because Kirsty is a barrister, KC, and an expert in international human rights. And she campaigned and they got a change at the UN to support children because it can be, sounds like a completely alien topic, but it can, and even in this country. But I think another of my favourite episodes was when somebody was talking about justice, because that again sounds so esoteric, and it was one of the former heads of the Supreme Court, and he was really explaining that in a fantastic way. And then when we asked him about what he was like when he was 10, he do you remember, Emma? He basically said, I was absolutely hopeless. I had my head in the clouds. I was absolutely hopeless at school, and I didn't get anywhere in terms of my applications, and kept failing at everything. And he was just incredibly refreshing, because he also emphasized the role of luck in life. Very much you have to make your luck, but people often say, I worked really hard and so I earned it. Lots of people work hard. So I really enjoyed that episode.
Yeah, it sounds like a fascinating episode, that's for sure. And I remember one of my mentors always saying to me, you don't get what you deserve in this life, you get what you negotiate. And I've always taken that through my own career and everything else, because I think it's important to know sort of, what you believe in and what you think you're absolutely worth. And I guess as an extension of that question, Alma, is there any particular law or laws that you come across on the podcast that you found maybe quite surprising, that, you thought you may have had a perception of a certain law, but actually you were quite surprised by certain guests? Is there anything you would like to tell us on that?
Well, there was one episode, it was quite recent actually, about is the king above law? And Sir John Baker came on for that one. So I learned that the king is in fact above the law, but as the monarch. But in his personal life, he isn't. So it was actually quite interesting. The king or queen has kind of two sides to him. He's got like one side where he has to be the king or she has to be the queen, and they're not affected by law. They're above the law. But in their personal life, if they were to, hit somebody with their car, that would be quite serious. So they wouldn't be above the law in that context. So I really enjoyed that podcast episode, especially because it kind of showed us that the king or queen actually kind of has a two-sided person, basically. It's quite funny in the same time too.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? You could go out on a formal engagement as the king on parole, and then later that evening you're suddenly below the law, so to speak, off duty. So, Lucinda, same question to you. Is there anything that you found surprising? Obviously, you've been practicing the law, you've been in lots of different environments, etc., but still, was there anything that surprised you?
I think just at the risk of repeating myself, I still can't get over the age of criminal responsibility. The UK is a complete outlier. We're only amongst a handful of countries in the world, even countries, China, Russia, not known for their civil liberties, have higher ages of criminal responsibility. And I guess it's just the imbalance of the responsibility versus the rights. So I'm sorry to be a bit, not be very original, but there we are.
No, I think speak from the heart and speak what you're passionate about. And absolutely, we support all of that here on the Legally Speaking podcast, particularly about topics and issues that need to be raised in terms of awareness. Are you tired of the current legal practice management software hitting you with outrageous price increases? Well, it's time to put an end to the renewal pain and discover 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐿, the trusted legal practice management solution for thousands of UK solicitors. Did you know that some providers have recently increased their prices by a staggering 300%? Don't let this drain your budget any longer. With 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐿, you'll experience cost-effective flexibility, transparent pricing, and a smooth migration process. Choose a plan that fits your needs and budget with no long-term commitments. Monthly billing cycles ensure you only pay for what you use. And guess what? Plans start from just £49 per user per month. No hidden fees or surprises. Say goodbye to price hikes and hello to trusted software. And talking of the podcast, Alma, do you have a dream guest you would love to appear on your show? And if so, why?
I've researched, and firstly, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this name, but there's a man, and he's called 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐿, and he's an activist and a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he campaigns for children's rights and education, and also against child labour. And I feel like that's a really courageous thing to do, since there's so much child labour going around the world. And I feel like it's a really important subject because, children are going to be affected and are affected because of child labour, and also about children's rights. I feel like the age of criminal responsibility, that is one of our rights, but I feel like it's really important for him to be doing this, and he does deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, so it would be really great to have him on.
Well, if anyone listening to our show has any connections or links, I think that would be an incredible episode, and I would strongly urge people to help and certainly to listen to it, hopefully when it happens. How about you, Lucinda? Do you have a dream podcast guest, and if so, why?
I think in broadly speaking, young people rather like Alma who've actually campaigned to change the law, I'm interested and very struck by there's teenagers who are campaigning very heavily to change the law about gun control in the United States. And I mean, can you imagine having to have that threat hanging over you? So I think if we were able to, and rather like Alma says, spread our interviewees a bit more globally, that's the sort of person I would like. But we've got some good people coming up, but those would be good people to have.
Yeah, and talking about coming up, we have the 3rd anniversary of the podcast fast approaching. So, Alma, are you doing anything exciting to celebrate this milestone?
Well, it's my birthday in a few days, so I guess that's a celebration. And not very serious, but I'll probably get some celebration lemonade, because that's what I get when I reach a milestone. So every 1,000 downloads, some lemonade. I guess that's one of the celebrations I could have at home alone. But yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm all for mini celebrations. I always say in the world of work, which I'm in, you celebrate those mini milestones along the way. How about you, Lucinda? Is there anything you're sort of thinking of doing or got planned for the 3rd anniversary of the show?
Well, we've recorded a summary of the top episodes in terms of downloads, or if they've caught the imagination in the media, and so that's going to be released. And it's it just is great to feel we've come this far. And so if people wanted to listen to a little snapshot of what Alma and I have been up to.
Yeah, and I would definitely encourage them to do that. Alma, what does the future look like for the show? What have you got planned for Kids Law? What can we look forward to?
Well, we're definitely going to keep it going. I mean, well, I'm just saying, definitely we are. Obviously, there are going to be more guests and more episodes coming too. And there are so many areas of law that we are going to cover. I mean, there are so many to cover left for us to make episodes about. So maybe about child labour, especially, like I've just said. I feel like that's very, very important. And also about teaching kids about law at school. That's a really important thing for me. So yeah, that's a few little things, but I don't want to give too much away, so.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to keep people on their toes, but I think you've given people enough of a slice of what's to come. So I'm excited as a fan of your show. Lucinda, what would you add? What can be some of the future plans or things that you're excited about with the show?
Well, as Alma says, we're always interested in looking how, law in the news, and thinking how would that be, children obviously watch the news, have, bombarded by stuff, and we'd like to be able to explain it. So we've put feelers out for people to talk about the use of AI, the law of space, how in other countries things like rivers and trees have been awarded legal status to protect the environment. We thought about having a panel of people to sort of monthly discuss the news. And in fact, on the back of the podcast with Frank 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐿𝐻, the Law Centre director, I'm going to be going into our local schools to discuss with him about to try and reach a diverse audience, to tell them about law. And also, not only can they get help, but also to really encourage them, because the more diverse our lawyers and practitioners are, the more meaningful it is for people. They can bring their life experience. We have got lots of ideas, but we're always a bit short of time. And as you know what it's like, it can take quite a while to bring something to fruition. And because I do this voluntarily, it moves as it does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there are only so many hours in the day, but I think what you do as a team is fabulous. And Alma, specifically for you, I'm inspired by what you're doing and how you're going out there and you're educating kids. But if you were sending a message to kids, what would be your advice for those about thinking about starting their own podcast? May not necessarily be in the legal world, could be in anything that they're keen to talk about. What would be your one piece of advice?
Well, I just want to apologize to Nike for stealing their slogan, but just do it. Don't be afraid, especially if you want your voice to be heard about something you feel is important to talk about, and just go out there and try. Even if it doesn't work out, it's really important for you to get your voice out there, and if you have to speak about something, it's really important for you to just do it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And how about you, Lucinda? Maybe there's lawyers out there or people who feel that they actually would like to get into the medium of podcasting. What would be one tip or something you would tell them in terms of advice if they're thinking of starting a show?
I think it's such a great idea because you can literally follow a passion. I would say be clear about why you're doing it, clear idea about the theme, how you can develop it, give it some longevity. So sketch out a number of episodes, line up interviews well in advance because the practicalities take longer than you think, and maybe have a couple under your belt before you actually launch it, because then people can think, great, and where's the next one? Because you know what people are like, always what's next. Think about your audience in terms of the focus for the questions and the answer, and you do need to do research. Those would be my thoughts.
Yeah, and I absolutely echo all of that. I think the more that you can put into really knowing your guests, researching your guests and bringing the best out of them on the airwaves, that's really, I guess, the skill in hosting, in my opinion. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Alma, if people want to learn more about kids law, where can they find out more? Do you want to shout out any social media handles or any websites or where they can find your podcast? We'll make sure we share them with this episode for you too.
Well, obviously you can go on the kidslaw.info website, but also on social media, so Spotify or Apple, Google Podcasts, and also you can get in touch with on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter, old Twitter, so X now. Or you can just email us on the Kids Law email, so it's kidslaw@spark21.org. So just get in touch and shout out your ideas. That would be great.
Yeah, and I'm sure this absolutely has sparked a number of ideas, hopefully, for our listeners and people in the legal community. Lucinda, if anyone wants to reach out to you about anything else that you're doing, as you mentioned, you're involved in a whole host of different things. What would be the best way for people to get in contact with yourself?
I'm on LinkedIn, so that maybe that's the most convenient. From what I've seen, I don't know if you, but LinkedIn has become increasingly a useful website with all, people are using it a lot more. Can I add a couple of things about what lawyers could do about helping children enjoy, of course, but learn more about it? They may be able to get their organisations to engage with the people in the local community, with workshops at schools, offer their time, explain what they do practically, but also career paths. You could also take groups of children to houses of parliaments and get local MPs. And in a personal capacity, just explain how laws work in every day and really encourage them to literally find their voice in speaking opportunities, debates, and if you go online, there's endless opportunities for children to take part in children's councils and children's parliaments and that kind of thing.
Yeah, really good advice. And as Lucinda says, best place to find her is on LinkedIn if you want to follow up with that discussion, or you really are keen to give back and help educate the next generation of professionals, for sure. Well, firstly, thank you both so much, Alma and Lucinda. It's been a real pleasure having you both on the show. Wishing you lots of continued success with Kids Law and your future pursuits, Alma, and indeed what you both get up to as a team. But from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.